This story was shared online by a guy who went camping with 3 of his friends. And honestly, it's one of those stories that gets worse the more you think about it. Because when you're camping, you already know there's almost nothing between you and whatever is outside. No locked door, no solid walls, just a thin piece of fabric and a zipper. Anyway, the whole thing happened during a stormy weekend in Southern California. The 4 friends had been trying to plan a camping trip for a while, but work and other responsibilities kept getting in the way. Eventually, they found a weekend when everyone was free. A few days before the trip, they saw that heavy rain was expected. Most people probably would have canceled. They didn't. They packed everything into their cars and drove out to a large campground surrounded by trees. It wasn't some completely isolated area in the middle of nowhere. There were marked campsites, bathrooms, and plenty of space for families and people with RVs. But because of the weather, the place was much emptier than usual. Most of the people who had still decided to come were staying inside trailers. The 4 friends, for some reason, still thought sleeping in 2 small tents was a great idea. To protect themselves from the rain, they placed a large plastic tarp over and around the tents. The tarp covered the ground between them and stretched over the top like a rough shelter. It worked pretty well, but there was one important detail. Anytime someone stepped on that plastic, it made a loud, unmistakable crunching sound. You couldn't quietly walk around their tents. At least that's what they thought. They spent the evening around the fire, eating, talking, and making fun of each other. There were 4 of them, so they divided into 2 tents. The guy telling the story shared one tent with a friend I'll call Ryan. The other 2, who I'll call Adam and Sam, slept in the tent directly across from them. The entrances were only a few feet apart. Before everyone went to sleep, the guy telling the story decided to mess with Adam and Sam. He called them from a hidden number and didn't say anything. Their phone rang inside the other tent. Adam and Sam immediately started wondering who would be calling that late. The first time they ignored it, so he called again. This time one of them answered. The guy held the phone near his mouth and started breathing loudly, trying to sound like some kind of murderer in a cheap horror movie. Adam and Sam actually got nervous. Then he called one more time. But this time, he and Ryan couldn't hold in their laughter. The prank was over. Everyone knew it was them. Adam and Sam yelled at them from the other tent, called them idiots, and promised they would get revenge. The whole thing was stupid but harmless. A few minutes later, the campsite became quiet. The narrator fell asleep almost immediately. Ryan stayed awake for a while. Adam and Sam were still talking in the other tent. And sometime later, someone stepped onto the tarp. At first, none of them reacted. They were in a forest. It could have been an animal moving around the campsite. But then they heard another step. And another. Slow, heavy footsteps. Not the quick movement of a raccoon. Not the light scratching of a small animal. A person was walking around the tents. The footsteps moved in wide circles, passing one entrance, going around the back, and returning on the other side. Then they crossed between the 2 tents. Ryan heard it from his sleeping bag. Adam and Sam heard it too. But because of the prank earlier, nobody said anything. Ryan assumed the other 2 were trying to scare them back. Adam and Sam assumed Ryan, or the narrator, had gone outside to continue the joke. So all 3 of them stayed still. They waited for someone to laugh, or whisper, or tap on the tent and run away. But whoever was outside didn't do any of those things. The footsteps just kept circling. Then something touched the side of Adam and Sam's tent. Not a branch, not the wind. They could hear fingers slowly dragging across the fabric. The person outside moved their hand along the wall of the tent from one side to the other. Then the hand disappeared. A few seconds later, it touched the fabric again. Adam and Sam were lying inside, completely awake, but they didn't move. They were still trying to convince themselves that one of their friends was doing it. Then the footsteps stopped directly in front of their entrance. Nothing happened for several seconds. No movement. No voice. Just silence. And then they heard the zipper. Very slowly, someone began opening the tent from the outside. Adam and Sam kept their eyes almost closed and pretended to be asleep. The entrance opened only part of the way at first. A man leaned his head inside. They couldn't see his face clearly because there was almost no light. All they saw was the shape of. Then the other. Neither of them moved. The man opened the tent the rest of the way and stepped inside. Now imagine this for a second. You're lying inside a small tent. It's dark. You don't have enough room to stand up quickly. Your friend is lying beside you. And a man you can't identify has just entered and is standing at your feet. He didn't ask for help. He didn't say he had the wrong tent. He didn't steal anything. He just stood there, watching them. Adam later said the man smelled strongly of alcohol. They could hear him breathing. For what felt like several minutes but was probably much less, the stranger remained at the entrance. Adam and Sam continued pretending to sleep because they had no idea what else to do. They didn't know if he had a weapon. They didn't know if someone else was outside. And they still weren't completely sure this wasn't somehow part of the prank. Eventually, the man stepped backward. He closed neither the tent nor the zipper. He simply walked away. His footsteps crossed the tarp again and slowly disappeared into the campground. Nobody came out of their tent. Nobody called out. And somehow, after lying awake for a long time, they all made it through the rest of the night. The next morning, the narrator woke up first. He had no idea anything had happened. He started making pancakes, just like he had promised the night before. One by one, the others came out of their tents. Adam and Sam looked exhausted. While they were eating, one of them told the narrator that his prank had gone way too far. He apologized for the phone calls. But they weren't talking about the phone calls. They accused him of walking around their tent, touching the walls, opening it, and stepping inside. He thought they were joking. Then Ryan interrupted. Ryan said he had heard the footsteps too, but he had assumed Adam and Sam were trying to get revenge. The four of them began arguing. Each person blamed someone else. Then very slowly, they realized the same thing. None of them had left their tent. The person who had walked around the campsite wasn't one of them. And the man who had entered Adam and Sam's tent was a complete stranger. While they were still trying to understand this, an older man approached their campsite. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in a long time. His shirt was stained. His clothes were dirty. And even early in the morning, they could smell alcohol on him. He smiled and casually asked whether they had slept well. Nobody answered right away. The question could have been completely innocent. People say things like that at campgrounds all the time. But after what they had just discovered, it didn't feel innocent. The man asked if they had any cigarettes. They said no. Then he pointed toward an old RV parked not far away and told them they were welcome to visit him. He walked toward the nearby bathrooms, then passed their campsite again on the way back. This time he didn't say anything. He just looked at them and smiled. Adam and Sam recognized the smell of alcohol. They couldn't prove it was him. They had barely seen the face inside the tent. But all four of them became convinced that the man from the RV was the person who had visited them during the night. A few hours later, he returned again. This time, he asked if any of them wanted to buy his RV. He encouraged them to come inside and look around. They refused. He kept trying to make the offer sound casual, but none of them were interested in going anywhere near that trailer. Eventually, the man left the campground, and only after he was gone did they notice something else. His RV had its own bathroom. There was no reason for him to walk across the campground and use the restroom near their tents. No reason to pass their site repeatedly. No reason to ask four strangers to come inside his trailer. Maybe he was just drunk and confused. Maybe he had wandered into the wrong tent without understanding what he was doing. But that explanation doesn't really make the story better, because he didn't stumble inside and immediately apologize. He circled the tents. He touched the fabric. He opened the entrance slowly. And then he stood there in complete silence, watching two people pretend to sleep. The four friends finished the trip without seeing him again. But the narrator said the experience changed the way he thought about camping. And honestly, I understand why. Because a tent feels private when you're inside it. You zip it closed, turn off your light, and your brain starts treating it like a small room. But it isn't a room. There's no real lock. Anyone standing outside can hear you breathing. They can see your shadow through the fabric. And if they decide to open that zipper, there may be almost nothing you can do before they're already inside. What makes this story especially disturbing is that the prank probably made everything worse. Because when the footsteps began, every person assumed one of their friends was responsible. Nobody spoke up. Nobody turned on a flashlight. Nobody called for help. The stranger was able to walk around both tents because all of them were waiting for the joke to end. And by the time they realized it wasn't a joke, he was already standing inside.